My first sight of England was on a chilly night in March 25 years ago, when I arrived in Dover, fresh from Iowa, by way of the midnight ferry from Calais. I was tired and hungry, and it was late. My intention was to spend a few weeks hitchhiking around Britain. Naturally, it did not remotely enter my mind that I was about to fall in love, and twice over. First with this serene and drizzly and seemingly fast asleep little island, and second with one of its inhabitants, and that my life in consequence was about to change forever. It would be 20 years before I went home again to stay. I didn't know any of this then, of course, or much of anything else, to tell you the truth. I didn't even know how to find a room in an English seaside town after midnight. All the guest houses in Dover had shut either their doors or, it seemed, their hearts. It was still the age of the ferocious landlady in Britain, but I didn't know that either. My wants were simple. I wanted only a clean bed and a cheery welcome, perhaps a roast beef sandwich with a little potato salad and a bottle of beer. But these seemed curiously unavailable in Dover. And so, a young man with more on his mind than in it, I happened upon a shelter on the seafront. I'd never been this cold without snow. Not realizing I was about to spend 2 decades here, I hadn't packed quite adequately. I extracted every potentially warming item of clothing from my pack, then sank heavily onto the bench and waited patiently for death's sweet kiss. Instead, I fell asleep. But that was 1973. I was 21 years old and away from home for the first time. Before me lay a country that was new and exciting and mysterious in a way you just can't imagine. England was full of words I'd never heard before. Streaky bacon, Belisha beacon, serviettes, high tea, half-day closing, the light program. I didn't know Morecambe and Wise from Marks and Spencer. I'd never heard of L-plates or Scotch eggs, Christmas crackers, or Gardener's Question Time. For all I knew, Sheffield Wednesday was a rendezvous. I was positively radiant with ignorance. In a newsagent, I heard a man ask for 20 number 6 and receive cigarettes. And for a long time after that, I thought that's how you ordered everything in a newsagent. By number, like in a Chinese takeaway. I had a long way to go. But the thing is, from the very first moment, I knew I wanted to go there. And after a quarter of a century, more than half my life, I'm happy to say I'm still getting there. This island may be small, but nowhere on earth has more history and enterprise, ingenuity and humor and quirkiness, and delightful eccentricity. I expect you're ahead of me. I like the place. If I had to list the things I like best about Britain, I'd start with London. It's the greatest city in the world. I love the sprawl of it, its unknowable vastness. I love the way that every time I look at an A to Z, I find whole districts that I'd never noticed were there before. Lesness Heath, Snaresbrook, Plashet, Fulwell Cross. I'm not sure of the exact moment I realized that I was going to like London very much and forever. It may have been when I saw a sign by the sink in the men's room at the British Museum that said, "For casual ablutions only, please." Then again, it may have been when I discovered that in a single small area of the city, there were churches with the resplendent names of St. Giles Cripplegate, All Hallows Barking, St. Sepulchre without Newgate, and, yes, I think this may have been the moment, St. Andrew by the Wardrobe. On the other hand, it may simply have been the first time I got into a black cab. Taxi? London cab drivers are, without question, the finest in the world. They're friendly, cheerful, exquisitely polite. They keep their cabs spotless inside and out, and they go to the most extraordinary lengths to deliver you at the front door of your destination. To my mind, there isn't a more gracious experience in the world than this. Some people like black cabs so much that they buy them for their own use, like the Duke of Edinburgh or the odd actor. like Stephen Fry. So at least it's turned out nice.
Yes, wouldn't trust it though, if I were you, frankly. I wouldn't be surprised if it started peeing down in about, well, an hour.
Pardon me?
I'm sorry?
I didn't hear what you said.
I said I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't start peeing down in about an hour. Summer? Ha! It's a joke, isn't it?
Why a black cab?
Well, I think there are two reasons. One is anonymity, but also, I have to confess, it also is a lot quicker. A cab is like a piece of clothing, and you put it on, and it's sort of you don't develop stringent views on immigration and actually turn into a cabbie in that sense, but you kind of, as I say, because you feel so much an institutional part of London's traffic that you don't do all this leaning on the horn and sweating and shouting if there's a queue. You just take it as, because you know that cabbies would die of a heart attack within 6 months if they reacted hysterically to the way traffic moves, because it's just so awful. Up yours, mate. Yeah.
Any chance of a cup of tea before we get there?
Do you know, I think there's a damn good chance I know somewhere not far from here. There we go. That'll be £725, please.
The two most distinguishing features about cab drivers, in my experience, are that they cannot drive more than about 200 feet in a straight line. No matter what the road conditions, at least once every quarter of a mile they must abruptly dodge down an alley. And a certain preoccupation with money. To get a cab driver to talk, just ask him who are the best tippers.
You never know. Do you know people get in the back of your cab and they chat to you, they're really friendly. It comes to £4.80. They give you a fiver and you give them the 20p change and they walk away.
Yeah.
You get someone else in there that hasn't said a word for half an hour. When they get out, they give you a £4 tip. They just walk away. You never know who's going to tip you or what they're going to tip you.
You can't tell at all.
No.
Australia could be the richest man in the world. The first thing he says to you is, how much would it cost me to get to Waterloo? Not take me to Waterloo, and you say, I don't know, £7 or £8, do it for £5. Love a deal.
They've got purses, haven't they?
They're staying in the top hotels. How much would it be to go to Heathrow?
The New Zealanders do, but the Aussies don't. They don't tip you nothing. The Americans work it out. They go, wait, I want to give you a gratuity.
Yeah.
That's what they call it. They work out 10% or something like that.
Yeah.
And for some Americans, that can be difficult,
Yes,
I think he's taking the mickey.
I hadn't been cab driving very long, and I came past the Criterion Theatre, and they was doing a re-showing of Oklahoma, and Howard Keel was starring in it. So he said, Dorman came out, so I've got a fare for your cabbie, So anyway, this enormous guy come out, Howard Keel, with a bottle of scotch in his pocket, and he pulled down both windows in the cab like that. He said, I've got no money. He said, but I sure can sing a song. And we're driving down the Strand and singing the Surrey with a Fringe on. There was like a megaphone coming out the back. And we got to the Savoy and he said, pay the driver. He said, give him £1 on top.
If you had to choose an area that captures the spirit and drive and infinite variety of London, you couldn't do better than Soho. To most people outside London, it's a place of clip joints and girly clubs. In fact, Soho is full of history, as well as clip joints and girly clubs. I think it's the history most of all that impresses me about London. I love the way that nearly every street has been touched by importance at some time in its past.
Okay, we get.
Thank you very much, Stephen.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks.
Look after yourself now. Bloody Americans.
The most visible reminder of this historical dimension to the city are, of course, the blue plaques you find everywhere. I have the greatest admiration for the fact that oftentimes they commemorate people whose achievements were what might be termed cherishably obscure. Handel's friend and secretary. Still, they do give you a vivid sense of the rich and delightful tumult of British history. There's no better example of this than in Frith Street in Soho, where in the space of 25 yards, you can go from to the man who gave us this. John Logie Baird. London has always been a magnet for outsiders. One street over, above what is now a posh restaurant, a young German exile named Karl Marx lived for 5 years with his wife and 8 children and their maid in 2 small and, it must be imagined, very noisy rooms. Somehow, amid all that chaos, he managed to develop the theories that became his masterwork, Das Kapital, and also somehow to conduct an affair with the maid. I don't know which was the more stressful or personally satisfying, but I do know which one changed the world. Revolution has never been high on the British political agenda. Sure, you've had a tussle or two to see who would wear the crown, and then there was a civil war which ended with the crown and the head it was on being separated permanently from the royal personage. That apart, there was only that Guy Fawkes fellow and one other little incident.
It was here in this house, then a stable, that 16 men hatched a plot to murder the entire cabinet and take over the country. Had they succeeded, Britain today would be a very different place, and this house would be a shrine, instead of a forgotten footnote to history.
They were led by one Arthur Thistlewood, a former estate agent, whose intention it was to shoot the entire cabinet as they sat down to dine, then proceed with his group of men to storm and capture a number of desirable properties: the Bank of England, Mansion House, the Tower of London, and Coutts Bank. What I find amazing in all this is that there was an estate agent who had 15 friends. In the event, the plan came hopelessly a cropper. The conspirators were betrayed by one of their own number and routed by a detachment of soldiers and police officers, while a mile away in Mayfair, the members of the cabinet were just tucking into their steak and kidney pudding.
Number 44 Grosvenor Square, perhaps the classic example of an estate agent failing to complete a deal.
Thistlewood was taken away and hanged, and the world became a slightly better place. It was time for me to go somewhere with a rather less happy ending. The first question that strikes me every time I go to Liverpool is, where is everybody? The answer is mostly elsewhere. Once Liverpool was an industrial powerhouse. Today, its main export is people. The decline of its population base is staggering. In 1930, there were 900,000 Liverpudlians. Today, it's barely half that. While other old industrial cities have boomed in the 1990s, Liverpool seems stuck in a spiral of decline. In Manchester and Glasgow and Newcastle and Leeds, you get a sense of dynamism and possibility. In Liverpool, you get a plastic palm tree. Any number of reasons have been given for the decline. The loss of jobs in the docks, the widespread demise of traditional industries, the absence of an international airport. Whatever the reason, there's no denying that it's a long way from paradise. Don't get me wrong, I like Liverpool, like it very much. It's probably my favorite city in England. It has great wit, a pleasing air of monumentality in its buildings and statues, a wonderful accent and rich turn of phrase, and an unshakable sense of itself. If there's any place in Britain that has the bulldog spirit, this is it. What made Liverpool work, and what worked for Liverpool, was the Mersey. A trip on the Mersey Ferry is still an agreeable way to pass a morning. It's a bit like the Sydney Harbour cruise, but without Sydney. Throughout, an onboard commentary crackles on about Liverpool's glory days. The gist of it is that this was once a great city, and today it's Liverpool.
The decline happened in a single generation. In 1966, Liverpool was still the second busiest port in Britain, after London. By 1985, things had fallen so far that it was less important than even Tees and Hartlepool, Grimsby and Immingham. But in its heyday, it was really something special. Maritime commerce brought the city not just wealth and employment, but a cosmopolitanism that few cities in the world could rival. But now...
If you're leaving us here at Liverpool, we hope you've enjoyed your cruise and look forward to welcoming you aboard again soon.
The one drawback of a Mersey Ferry cruise is that they won't let you get off without listening to Ferry Cross the Mersey, which will ring in your ears then for the next 11 days, a sort of Liverpool tinnitus. The words today have a poignancy they couldn't have had in Jerry Marsden's day.
So ferry, cross the Mersey, 'cause this land's the place I love, and here I'll stay.
To try to get people to stay, the government spent £400 million over 2 decades on projects to revitalize the local economy. Never let it be said that any of this money was wasted.
You know, if you were to take this down and re-erect it in some place like Las Vegas, it'd be worth a fortune. You could make it into a Disney store or something.
The boundary lines between dereliction and hope are often obviously drawn. An empty factory on one side of the street, on the other a new sushi bar. Somehow it seems to sum up the place.
And it seems very, very focused here. I mean, you were saying about how as soon as you leave the city limits, you're in Lancashire. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, you know, with most British cities, like in Newcastle, Newcastle accent shades into a kind of Northumbrian rural accent. But in Liverpool, it stops like in a street in St Helens or somewhere. That on one side of the road, everybody's going, oh, aye, well, and you know, because they talk slow, they kind of think slow and actually go, oh, I think I'll pick up this, whatever you call it, you know. But and on the other side of the street, everyone go, yeah, well, I got this like chopstick and all. It's like, you know, I'm gonna stick it up, you know, it's like just get a laugh, you know, like I don't mind, like I'm gonna give myself a brain tumor, but at least it'll be funny, you know. You know, but it's like there is no relationship between Scouse accent and you know, the accent of the hinterland, you know.
So tell me, is everybody in Liverpool a comic? Because it sure seems that way to me.
No, only about 97%. Because they always say, oh, well, you know, you have to have a sense of humour to live here. But, you know, I mean, life's pretty rotten in Romania, and they're not famous for their comedians, are they?
But here it seems almost, I mean, it seems almost instinctive. I mean, even people are funny even when they don't realise it. I had a friend who's came to Liverpool and he went in a jeweller's shop and he wanted to get a watch strap or something, but there was somebody else ahead of him, and the customer ahead of him asked for a crucifix. And the girl who was serving him said, do you want it plain or do you want it with a little man on it? And I thought, that could only happen in Liverpool, surely.
I think in Liverpool, Giotto would have been working for Walker's Warrington Ales.
I sensed that Alexei was getting tired of pushing raw fish around a plate. I know I was. And anyway, he was keen to show me one of Liverpool's true glories, a pub. And with the reluctance of Bill Clinton invited to an Ann Summers party, I agreed to go.
I mean, you know, something like this.
I see what you mean.
So the reason they had to build them this big was because of the top hats. Yeah, there was a fad in the Edwardian era for gigantic top hats. Average Liverpool boozer. It's extraordinary to think that the city could once, you know, just build this for a pub, you know.
Yeah. One of the growth industries in Liverpool seems to be car parks. Every time I come to the city, there are more of them than there were the last time. But this is no ordinary car park. This was originally a cemetery. When they decided to build the car park, they moved all the graves out, except for 2, those of Mr. and Mrs. Joseph Williamson. I have no idea why Mr. and Mrs. Williamson stayed behind, or what Mrs. Williamson might think about it. But Mr. Williamson, we can presume, doesn't mind at all, because by all accounts, he seemed to like it underground.
I'm going to take you somewhere where nobody has gone before in the last 180 years.
So when did you get into this Williamson fellow?
Well, it was 1986.
Did you know about these tunnels when you were growing up in Liverpool?
Yeah, well, as a kid, these tunnels were a myth to us. And we're going in here. This is the entrance to the underworld kingdom.
And Gabriel has the key. Over the past 10 years, Gabriel Mewis has made himself the foremost authority on the amazing subterranean world of Joseph Williamson. Williamson was a tobacco magnate, and in no small measure personified All the qualities of boldness and enterprise that characterized Britain in the 19th century, but with more than a dash of eccentricity thrown in. He spent £25 million by today's standards on one of the most extensive systems of tunnels ever built anywhere, and for no discernible reason. No one knows how extensive Williamson's network of pointless tunnels is, but it certainly runs to miles. His explanation was that it provided work for the unemployed. A more plausible explanation is that he just liked making tunnels.
Was this guy just out of his mind?
Well, it remains to be seen, really, but I mean, it's an amazing feat of workmanship that dug these out. That's the thing. So keep your head down as we're going through. As you can see here, Bill, there's several other entrances, tunnels here, one above, one below here, which run for miles and miles under Liverpool. But this particular one here runs the full length of Mason Street, and it runs under all the mansions that were on Mason Street at the time, and he could get into every mansion through the cellars.
Really? What for?
Well, who knows? I mean, even in them days, there was a bit of hanky-panky going on.
So he must have been a busy man.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he had access to all the maids then, didn't he?
How many houses are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about 50-odd houses.
50-odd houses?
Yeah.
And did the owners know that he was coming?
No, not at the time they didn't. It was after his death that they found out that he could get into all the houses.
Maybe he was just going in and having a midnight snack or something.
Oh, yeah, well, maybe. He enjoyed himself anyway. You want to come in and have a look at some of them?
I'd love to, yeah.
You see if we can see one of the maids?
Okay, yeah, lead on.
Now keep close to me because I don't want to lose you.
Williamson was curiously secretive about the tunnels and would never let any visitors see them. It's not even known that Mrs. Williamson knew of their existence. But if Gabriel's hanky-panky theory is correct, it's easy to see why.
Gabriel?